Hi, welcome back to McNally's Musket Missive. I'm Harry McNally, and this is a rifle musket. Last episode, we talked about the Model 1861, and today, we're going to talk about the Model 1861, the Special Model 1861. At the beginning of the American Civil War, Sam Colt reached out to the government and requested that he be sent some finished arms that he could use as a pattern to begin production of his own, because he knew that the United States was going to need a lot more arms than Springfield could produce. That May, he received 3 complete rifle muskets for him to pattern production off of. And his intention was to collaborate with Springfield on the new Model 1861, which he knew was coming and hadn't quite been finalized yet. What he didn't anticipate was that Springfield was going to say, you know what, to heck with the changes, we need stuff out the door immediately. Let's just get rid of the Maynard Tape primary system and call it a day. Although one of his men did suggest to the master armorer at Springfield to change the rear sight to give it these protective leaves that I talked about last episode. But other than that, what Colt ended up making was completely different from what Springfield was making, hence Special Model of 1861. Soon after the collaboration began, Springfield began producing the Model 1861, and Colt realized that what he was making was going to be very, very different from what the government was making. But even so, he still said, hey, here's what I'm doing. You may want to consider this. I think this is a good idea, and I think this isn't. Just continued corresponding with them, and a lot of what he did with the with his Special Model 1861 ended up appearing in the follow-up Springfield Model 1863. In particular, the deletion of the clean-out screw on the bolster. The bolster was brought back closer to the barrel. There's a straight vent at an angle going from the bolster into the barrel, no more 90-degree bend. Rounded clamping barrel bands, and a straight ramrod, no more swell to help retain it. What they did instead was they returned to the spoon arrangement inside the stock that had been used up until the Model 1855. Only 3 contractors made the Special Model 1861. That would be Colt, LG&Y, and I've never been able to pronounce this one, Amoskeeeaaag. Despite being called the Model 1861, only a few parts off of this were interchangeable with the regulation Model 1861. The trigger guard, the nose cap, the wood screws, and the lock plate screws on the side. Other than that, this was very much its own thing. Let's get it over into the light box, and I can highlight some of these changes. So here we have the Colt Special Model 1861. At first glance, it's pretty much identical to the regular Model 1861. But moving in closer to see the lock plate, we see it's shaped differently. The lock plate of the Colt Special Model is more reminiscent of the British Enfield. We see the new hammer, the S shape of the hammer, the new bolster with the eagle stamp on it. The rear sight, as I mentioned in both this episode and the previous episode, have the ears. I keep saying leaves, I mean ears, to protect the leaves of the rear sight. Moving forward, we've got the new barrel bands. These are held on with screw tension, and they're rounded instead of flat as on the Springfield 1861. They do retain the U marking to tell the soldier which way is which. Moving forward to the middle barrel band, same deals, held in place by screw tension. We've got the sling swivel there, and up to the business end. I've obviously tilted the camera. It's not visible in this photograph, but the ramrod no longer has a swell to retain it into the stock. Flipping it over, we see same as the Springfield 1861, a couple of screws in the washers, no more side plate like we had on the Charlottesville derivatives. Some faded cartouches. Moving up to the top, we've got the 1863 dated barrel, the VP Eagle Head proof markings. If you look really closely, you'll see inspector stamps all over this weapon. Moving in closer to the side of the barrel, we see another one of those inspector stamps I was talking about, JLC. Also, Samuel Colt wanted you to know that his barrels were made of steel and not the crappy compressed particle board that you get from the barrels at IKEA. Going to the bottom, the ramrod is of a consistent width all throughout. It doesn't have the swell that the 1855 and the 1861 had to hold it in place. Now going into a little bit of nitty-gritty detail, we see here the top of a Springfield Model 1861, the bolster further out from the center line of the barrel as compared to this, the bolster of the Special Model 1861, much closer to the center line. Unfortunately, I didn't have the foresight to actually scale these photographs together consistently, so there is a little bit of a jump back and forth. See here the Springfield, and here again the Colt. The key way to tell the difference is that if you look at the hammer of the Colt, and you see between the hammer and the tang, there's a lot less wood of the stock as visible as there is here with the Springfield. You can really tell the difference on how much further out the bolster is from the center line of that barrel. It has been said that the Colt Special Model 1861 is kind of a hybrid between a Springfield and a British Enfield, and there's a bit of truth to that. Behind the lock plate, the internal components of the lock mechanism are more laid out like an Enfield than it is a Springfield. These rounded barrel bands, that's very Enfield-like. The reason for that is fairly simple. Before the war, a company that made British Enfields went under and Colt purchased their tooling. And since he had that machinery and tooling on hand when he got the contract to make a Model 1861s, he figured why let that go to waste. It would have been cheaper to... It would have been more expensive to produce new tooling, especially when at the time he thought he was collaborating with the government to make the new Model 1861 instead of ending up making his own thing. So I'm cutting in here because I figured it'd be better to show you rather than just to say that these parts are different. First, here we've got the inside of a Model 1861 lock. Unless you're really familiar with these guns, you're not going to know what the hell you're looking at, so let's go ahead and throw up some annotations. There we go, that's better. Okay, so you've got the mainspring, which is connected to the stirrup, which transfers power from the mainspring to the tumbler. On the other side of the tumbler, on the other side of the lock plate, is the hammer, so that's what's causing... The mainspring is causing spring tension to bring the hammer down. Preventing that are notches on the tumbler where the sear fits. And you push up on the sear with the trigger, that releases the pressure, hammer comes down, and the sear spring is providing pressure on the sear so that it doesn't come down all by itself. Okay, so looking at the Model 1861 configuration, note that the mainspring meets the stirrup rather low in the lock. The side screw hole is in front of the bridle, which is the large piece that basically holds all the pieces in place. Here we've got the Colt lock. Again, you're not really going to know what's what unless I do this. There we go. So yeah, the stirrup is further up on the lock than it is on the Springfield Model 1861. The bridle is shaped a little bit differently. The side screw hole is behind the bridle. Now let's go ahead and take a look at an Enfield lock. You'll note that aside from the shape of the lock plate itself, that's basically the same as the Colt. So despite not being completely interchangeable with the with the government Model 1861, Colt's Model 1861 was produced throughout most of the war and saw service until the end. It did fit the same bayonet as the government models, but other than those few parts that I mentioned, it didn't interchange at all. But from a military standpoint, this is interchangeable with any other 58 caliber Springfield arm. For all intents and purposes, that is what it is, even though it's not parts interchangeable. Production and use of the Special Model 1861 continued through to the end of the war, with a number of states also purchasing a number for their own use. So that's all I have for this episode. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I want to say a special thank you to my Patreon supporters, without whom none of this would really be possible. If you'd like to become one of them, there's a link to my Patreon down below. So that's everything I have for this episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.